Please welcome Charlie Polinger, director of The Plague. Well, congratulations. You've made one feature film and you got invited to Cannes. That's a pretty good way to start.
Yeah, I feel very lucky.
When you submitted it, were you thinking, okay, this has got a shot here? Or I mean, what made you think that you could get into Cannes with your first movie?
It was more just that I thought, let's start with our dream place and sort of go from there with the festival circuit. And we found out only 2 days before the announcement, and we were shocked.
So what was the experience? Your premiere was yesterday at the WC Theater, and the reaction was extremely good. What has the experience of Cannes been like for you so far?
It's kind of what I imagine. It's completely overwhelming. It's amazing. It feels like a place that feels like it cherishes cinema in a way that you don't see in a lot of places. So it's really special.
Mm-hmm. So we should, for people who haven't seen it, this is about a 12-year-old boy who's at a water polo camp, but it's really about the insecurities and terrors of being 12 and desperately wanting to fit in, I suppose. I know I sat there squirming in recognition, although I've never played water polo or done anything like that. But just the idea of feeling uncomfortable and judged every time you walk into a group of people. I mean, where did this come from for you? What made you think, okay, this is a story I want to write?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I've never played water polo either, and I'm actually a very bad swimmer, so I couldn't even get close. But I mean, it came from experiences I had to go to some all-boys, summer camps, and just sort of some of my experiences at those, and just some of my experiences being that age and in school and in general, and wanting to just tell a story that felt like it really immersed the audience in a subjective experience of being a 12-year-old boy and all of the sort of chaos and anxiety that comes with that.
I mean, in a way, you put that in a form. I mean, there's, last year at Cannes, we had the 50-year-old woman body horror movie. And in a way, this is a 12-year-old boy body horror movie with a little bit of like a gender swap on Carrie. How did you decide that this was the way you wanted to deal with that subject?
Well, it kind of started from just trying to think about my experiences of being 12, and that, I mean, I see a lot of movies about 12-year-old boys that are often either a little more like, Goonies style, like biking around at night, this kind of carefree feeling, or a little more kind of like bro-y hangout kind of movies. And sort of my sense of being 12 was it was more like the sort of like social anxiety hellscape. And you see that more commonly, I think, in movies about women or about young girls like Carrie and like Raw and Eighth Grade. I think you don't see it as often in films about boys because there's a certain like vulnerability to be the object of terror or to be the object of insecurity in your body. And there's sort of a fear of that vulnerability being shown in, centered around masculinity. So I thought it could be exciting to kind of take a genre that I've seen more with women and apply it to sort of a story about boyhood.
So when you were 12, were you thinking at all of doing this with, when you grew up? I mean, were you obsessed with films or a film fan? Or
I was obsessed with films, and I would watch movies with my grandma all the time, and there's a lot of James Bond films, and I'd make sort of my own fan fiction ones, and a lot of sort of like Austin Powers and some of the like sillier films at that time. So I was always a huge film fan. I was into theater for a long time. I didn't really imagine I could actually make films until much later, though.
So in the writing process with this one, was it easy? I mean, did you sort of settle on a narrative quickly?
It did kind of come together pretty quickly. I actually wrote it. It was sort of during COVID. I went and stayed with my parents, and I was sort of cleaning out my childhood room, which my mom was sort of insisting it was time to go through some stuff. And I found all these like old sort of journals and diaries I had kept, and I was kind of reminded of some of my experiences over the course of a summer camp and stuff like that. And this idea of the plague was sort of a real thing that occurred. And so from there, I turned that into sort of like a treatment and built that out, and it flowed really quickly because the characters were so based on people I knew, and even sort of like quotes I had written down in my journals sort of made it into the script as lines of dialogue. And so probably compared to any script, it came out pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, we should explain probably the title of the plague refers to, a kid who has a skin condition, and then they announce that that's the plague, and if you touch them, you need to wash yourself immediately, or you'll get it. And it feels like none of them actually believe it, but they are committed to the bit.
Totally. I mean, I think it's a thing that I think was very real when you're 12, where this sense of, is this a joke or is this not a joke? And who can you ask about that? And it seems like it's a joke, but I mean, I think this is the same with adults. At a certain point, if something that is like a myth or folklore is talked about enough, it can become a reality, whether it's real or not.
So when you have a script that you like, I mean, what was the process for you as a first-time director here actually, getting this made?
I mean, it took a long time. It was, not on paper an obvious sell because, all the lead characters were these boys. It does have genre elements, but it's not a sort of traditional horror film. And so it was, a process of just sort of going around it was almost a year and a half of, my manager and UTA just going around trying to find someone who was willing to take the risk. And finally, Imagination came on, Lizzie Shapiro. I worked with my partner, Lucy McKendrick, and we were able to kind of pull it all together and, knock it out in like a 26-day shoot.
So Joel Edgerton, you had worked with on short films before, or he was aware of your work?
My agent sent the script to him, and he, I think, responded to it because of just his own experiences being 12 and his own experiences with bullying and, a fascination with boys that age. And I think at first he was actually inquiring about directing it, and I was sort of like, I really have to do this one. And he was generous enough to offer to act in it and help produce it just to help get it made. So that was really kind of the thing that took us over the edge in finding the financing. And, he both a fantastic actor who I've admired for, many years, but also kind of a mentor as a filmmaker.
I remember a conversation I had, I think 2 years ago with Cord Jefferson, who had done American Fiction, and Celine Song, who had done Past Lives. And they were talking about writing these scripts that meant a lot to them. And Cord said, people would say, well, let's get Spike to direct this. And he said, if you get somebody else, I don't want you to have this. I mean, this has to be me. And Celine said, oh, I would have jumped at having anybody make this script. So you were in the first camp there?
I was in the first camp, and I think, I know Celine has a background as a playwright, so, she's obviously been a fantastic writer for a long time. I think I came up in directing, and the goal was always I really want to direct something that feels really personal to me and really exciting as sort of a directorial piece. And so I wrote this with that in mind of, in a way, I wanted it to be a really kind of simple classic story, this kind of like triangle of this boy between, trying to conform and this moral dilemma of how to handle his own conscience against the stakes of being ostracized. But the thing that felt really exciting was how could I cinematically tell this story in a way that felt fresh to me and felt like it was really immersing an audience in the experience of being 12, where even things that maybe to like a more adult audience you might know are not such a big deal, when you're 12 they feel like, life and death stakes. And so I didn't want to be like, judging that from the distance, like the safe distance of adulthood. I wanted it to feel like we're visceral and we're present and we're actually like in there as a 12-year-old. And so in a way it felt like almost that's where the genre stuff came from. And even like looking at some war films where it's like every single, every glance and every sort of whisper feels dangerous.
So what do you do cinematically to, to raise the stakes like that, to give that sense?
I guess, I mean, I really was just trying to think about how, Ben, the protagonist, would feel in any given moment and find ways to cinematically evoke his sort of interior state through the external world. So if, as his anxiety would increase, the sounds of, like in a cafeteria, or the sounds of people chattering would get louder and more chaotic, or the sounds of dripping and things like that, or the shots would become more, either ominous and grand, or more claustrophobic in this way that it would try to mirror just, making an audience subconsciously feel like they're experiencing what he's feeling internally.
So you have a short shooting schedule, and you've got a cast that, Joel Edgerton aside, is mostly 12-year-old boys. How tricky was the casting and working with all the kids?
I mean, the most challenging thing was just that they have really short days. So on top of the schedule, it was especially tight. So we had to be really, really thoughtful about our priorities every day. But the actual working with the kids was like, what probably the most fun thing about the shoot. They were, some of them had acted in films before, some of them it was their first time, but they all came taking it really seriously. They were really imaginative in how they approached acting, and it was really refreshing to see that. And even Joel would talk to me about just the way that they could be so reactive and so spontaneous, because they hadn't gone through all of the years of trying to kind of like build a craft out and thinking about all that stuff. So it was really like a joy to watch them. And we saw thousands of tapes to try to find these kids, and it was really about, if we got the exact right kid, we knew that we just had to capture that like lightning in a bottle of each of them feeling like the world was set for them to just not have to act too much, and to be able to just like listen and be present. And I think all of them did a really amazing job, and they all stepped up.
I mean, as a director, when you giving notes or working with them ahead of time, did you find you had to adjust, like, okay, well, this kid needs to be approached this way and this guy needs to be handled differently?
Yeah, definitely. And then they all had different vocabularies and different comfort levels with camera and hitting marks and all those types of things. But we kind of figured out each of their the way that they each worked, and we worked closely both with this acting coach named Jackie, and my wife and my partner Lucy also was really involved, helping me kind of like massage the performances and work with the boys. And so we kind of found a really good rhythm where it just sort of, we realized what each of them needed to feel most comfortable to just let themselves fall into a scene. And a lot of it was trying to create an environment where then they didn't have to like stop all the time and keep adjusting lights and stuff, and set the world and set the chaos that was organically around them, and just give them an opportunity to react naturally to that.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, there's also a fair amount of action in the swimming pool, which doesn't strike me as being the easiest thing to get in and out of quickly.
Yeah, the pool, we only had a few days there, so that was especially crazy. And the first week before we shot, we brought all the boys out and we had like a water polo boot camp, and like some of them had never played water polo. Some of them, they all knew how to swim, but like some of them were not super experienced swimmers. So we were going between like costume fittings to like water polo training sessions, back into rehearsals, and they picked it up. I mean, some of them were, surprisingly good at water polo by the end of the shoot. And some of them were like, begging me to like get back in the pool and keep playing. And it was like, we have to stop, and move on to the next shot.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love the opening sequence, which is shot from under the water as they jump in one by one. And it's so, dreamy, and the sounds are muffled, but each kid coming in sort of is this muffled explosion. How did you come up with that, and how, was that tricky to shoot?
It's funny. I mean, that actually was sort of a discovery in the edit. The opening shot is scripted as like the second shot of the film, which is this sort of shot of all of the boys in order doing this treading drill. And then it kind of like pushes towards them and it cuts above water, and they're doing this, you have to keep your hands up and clap. when we were shooting all the underwater stuff, I had this kind of like cool remote control, like walkie-talkie with the scuba team. And so all the time I just started saying, let's roll the camera before everyone even gets in the water. Let's see what we get. And so we rolled it, and they all kind of just dived in and swam to the positions for what was then when we call it action technically. And looking at the dailies, we were like, oh my God, this is the best possible way we could start the film.
Was it a nod to Carrie that a lot of the stuff that goes down at the end is at the dance? That feels like a time-honored tradition in films like this.
Yeah, Carrie.
That at the
and,
dance.
I love a dance. I love like a school dance. I've always, even when I was in school, found them. I felt like I was in a movie when I was in school going to those dances. Everything from Carrie and Virgin Suicides and all of the Breakfast Club, like all of it, or 16 Candles, like all those classic kind of teen movie dances were, I don't know, there's just something so kind of like tacky and weird about them, and I thought that would be an interesting place for something darker to occur at.
Right. I mean, were there unexpected films you were thinking of that were served as models in one way or the other for this one?
I mean, definitely. I was looking at, a pretty big range from some of the stuff we talked about, like Carrie or Black Swan or Raw, but also a lot of these war films are films about groups of men, like Beau Travail, Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, like films that are obviously a very different world and a very different type of film that explored sort of masculinity in these kind of concealed claustrophobic settings of like a battalion. And so I was looking at those a lot. There's this great film, Water Lilies, and that was another one that we looked at, sort of about a synchronized girls swim team. And, some just like a lot of genre films from the 60s and 70s, which I think don't lean into the same tropes that you see as often today, but are often very psychological, where things like the sets will subtly, imperceptibly change to, mirror an interior psychological state. And so I was really into watching some of that stuff.
When you have a group of that many 12-year-old boys, I assume 13, whatever, can you prevent them from basically forming their own groups and judging each other and, sort of the dynamic that we see play in the film playing out behind the scenes?
It's like a great question because it was something we were thinking about a lot heading into production, and we sort of were talking with the intimacy coordinator and our acting coach about like trying to create some boundaries between the film and the reality and not trying to make it method, So it would be like we would huddle up after and say, okay, that was great. Let's all give, Eli a hug. We're all friends here. And no, in real life, and maybe this sort of, I don't know if it ruins the lore of the film, but like, the actor who played Jake and the actor who played Eli became extremely close friends, and they were, started making like rap songs together and making beats and stuff. And so it was very nice to see the group develop in real life.
Mm-hmm. Right. So how about your lead who played Ben? He didn't have experience acting before, or did he?
He did a little bit. He had starred in a film called Griffin in the Summer, which I had seen before, and he was like exceptional in that film. But it's a very different role. And then he came and auditioned and blew me away with like, completely different type of performance, but sort of equally committed. And he feels like an actor like 2 or 3 times his age. He's like insanely prepared. He's coming with all of his notes. He always wants to try all these different ways. I was sad he wasn't able to make it here because he's acting in a TV show where he has a very large role, but I'm excited for him.
Right. Did you have any 12-year-olds saying, okay, what's my motivation here? Or I have some thoughts on this character?
Not quite like that, but they were definitely like, that one didn't feel authentic. Like, can we try it again? Or like, I don't know if I would like sit here. I think I feel like I would stand over here. And they were, they were fully creative collaborators and bringing like a huge amount to the table.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other particular challenges that you had to, figure your way around when you were shooting?
Time was tricky, and just the fact that we were, we actually shot the film in Romania mostly. And so part of the reason we went was because they had these incredible pools, and we found this location on the internet. I actually I sent an email sort of infamously to the producing team one night that was like best pools in the world, and it was a list of like the 10 most incredible pools that I had seen in different countries around like Europe and Canada, and there's this one in Romania that we all sort of like had our eyes on, and so we, you know, it was a big reason we shot there. But like, for example, they don't have traditional locker rooms there, and you know, there's other things that you would find in an American, you know, like a YMCA type facility that just didn't exist. So we had to kind of build some of the sets and match those, and we'd have to sort of shoot them separately. And so that was something we had to be really mindful of with like the continuity.
I mean, okay, this is an American indie, and this is certainly in the news. I mean, would it have been prohibitive to shoot in the U.S.?
I think it would have been more challenging. I mean, for one reason, even just finding those types of similar locations were pretty out of our budget range. I would have, you know, loved to shoot in the U.S. though, but I think I know that they were talking about it earlier here, where that summer it seemed like you're potentially heading into a strike, and we also wanted to, you know, shoot it over the summer while we had the boys on summer break and while the financing was locked in. So there's a number of reasons that went towards the decision.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I saw you linked to an upcoming Mask of the Red Death film. Is that your next project?
It is, yeah. I can't say too much about it, but it's an adaptation of the Poe story. But I think it's not maybe what one might expect based on just the text itself. It's sort of set in a medieval type world in this castle, and it's definitely like dark comedy, really kind of unhinged. And it also does have a plague in it, so just a very different type of plague.
All right. Okay. Well, congratulations, and thanks for coming here and talking about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.